It is a surreal experience to have these fans come, but new fans too, strangely enough. People who are introduced to the show that have never seen the show, like when it first was created in 66 or 67, seeing it for the first time on these high science fiction channels or whatever it is, and new people coming up to you and saying how much they enjoy and of course, here I am, an old man now, and they're looking at me as a young man, and you're sitting with them, and they still have the same wonderful feelings towards you that they did towards young Willie and all those people. But the conventions are great in the sense of giving the people fun. They really do enjoy it. They love it. They're such a giving audience when we're up there on the stage. They just love the characters there, and I guess 60 to 70% of them have embodied with them for 40 years. You know, now they're teaching their children, they're showing their children these same things that we did 40 years ago, and so I always enjoy it. I always enjoy going to the convention, especially New York, getting on a nice plane and walking through my old neighborhoods in Brooklyn and Manhattan and getting some fresh clams and fresh oysters and real food that doesn't exist in California. Even when they fly it out, something happens to it. I don't know. Not the same, except for Maine lobster. Remains the same. I didn't pay too much attention to that, except when I saw myself in them, I said, ugh. And I did like the characters I was playing, though, in that time slot. Playing, you know, every once in a while I'll see an old thing of being back in the time and being a lawyer and saying these things and say, man, that's not bad work. That's pretty darn good. And that's spur of the moment work. That's lines you learned on the subway, coming into work that morning and then doing it. That was a lot of fun to do that, you know, pretty complicated at times. And of course the mind was fresh, able to do that stuff. And as far as in the past, didn't matter, just give me the part, let me see what's going on there, and that was good. Costume was immaterial. What a great pleasure it was to work with a Joan Bennett, you know. And of course she was getting on a little bit and maybe not, you know, but 89% there, 89% great, and you know, and I'm an old-time movie fan, and when I see this actress working with Spencer Tracy, a privilege to work with her. If you're an actor at that time, it was to me. And Louis Edmonds, wonderful actor, wonderful, wonderful actor, and Johnny was just a great friend and the backbone of Dark Shadows. Without John, there is no Dark Shadows. He's the man, no question about it. He's the main man, and he pulled it off. And how the hell did he learn all those lines every day after 3 or 4 nights, you know, vodkas at night to release yourself from that day's work? But he was in there fighting the next day, year after year. Missing its bite as Jonathan was playing Bramwell, are you kidding? I almost overlooked that whole section of it. It wasn't Dark Shadows anymore. It was a last gasp at something to try to make it whatever. Wrong, dead wrong, and didn't work at all. Johnny was lost, and it wasn't Dark Shadows. Jonathan Frid is a vampire, not Bramwell, whatever he was. And as I think of it now, I say how wrong it was. Didn't think of it too much then, just dismissed it. And as I think of it now, nothing to do with Dark Shadows, a dying gasp. That's all it was. Well, from what I hear from a good friend of mine, that Jonathan did not want to play Barnabas anymore, and if he was to continue on, he wanted to play a different character. Well, they gave him the shot, and that was that. Sayonara all over. And I can hardly remember that he was anybody else. He was so, you know, so much what he was as the vampire, and whatever else he was after that. And I later saw Johnny in a play that he was so wonderful in. He had a chance to know his lines, had a chance to be down. He did not have to play the vampire to be great. But in that instance, the whole thing was wrong. Everybody was wrong in the thing at the end. It just wasn't Dark Shadows anymore, nothing to do with it. So, whatever. I was interested in young, beautiful women, and they were all over the place on the show. And just, I'm talking platonic, of course. I mean, just, you know, just wonderful friends and lovely people and all that jazz. But I love the fact of the location where we shot Dark Shadows. We had our own little separate studio in New York, disconnected from every big major place like CBS or this or that. Had this little studio, which was just wonderful. It was like a little home to come into, and it was strictly Dark Shadows and nothing else. Dan Curtis, to me, is a friend for the last 40 years. After Dark Shadows, I worked with Dan a dozen more times on different projects. A dozen. Dan and I and my ex-wife and his still wife would go out to supper quite often, and we were pals, we were buddies, and always a good friend, always a good guy. He's getting very old now, Dan, so I don't see him as much. But I still come into the office and give him a kiss and a hug.